welcome to Red Hat Day 2 Operations with Satellite 6, Ansible and Red Hat Insights for Windows Administrators, provided by Red Hat and Stone Drawer Group. My name is Andrea Alexander with Stone Drawer Group, and I will be your host for today's event. In today's workshop, we will demonstrate how to configure Ansible, Red Hat Insights, and Satellite 6 to effectively manage RHEL servers. For those of you not familiar with Stone Drawer Group, we are a Red Hat Apex partner specializing in DevOps transformation. We work with companies of all sizes to implement best practices using Red Hat solutions. As part of our service offerings, we have a few items that may be of interest to those attending today's session. The first is our Satellite 6 Accelerator. This service provides the end-to-end solution to bring your RHEL servers into a single management platform, allowing you to manage your infrastructure with a single console. In our Accelerator engagement, we take care of installing and configuring Satellite 6, registering clients, and integrating with Active Directory. We do provide all the subscriptions needed as well as consulting services to ensure you successfully implement Satellite and have the necessary controls in place. Key areas improved through the implementation of Red Hat Satellite include content management, patching and software management, as well as provisioning and subscription management. The second item I wanted to bring to your attention is our Ansible Migration Accelerator engagement. This service provides the subscriptions and services necessary to implement the Ansible automation platform. In our Accelerator engagement, our consultants conduct a thorough analysis of our clients' current automation infrastructure, managed digital offerings, as well as their desired future state of digital offerings. From there, we will create and execute a migration plan that establishes a new consolidated automation framework, provides a migration path for existing assets, and enables cross-functional teams to develop and share automation deployment methodologies. We do provide all the subscriptions needed as well as consulting services to ensure you successfully implement Ansible. Key areas improved through the implementation of Red Hat Ansible platform include one architecture, interface and development language for all automation, repeatable processes to migrate legacy automation workflows, and a compliant process to develop and publish automation tasks. And finally, I wanted to make sure you were aware of our complimentary 5-day access to today's lab environment. This is offered to those attendees who participate in the entire workshop today, and also schedule an initial consultation. To request your complimentary consultation, email us at letsdothis@stonedrawergroup.com, and our team will get you scheduled for a follow-up discussion. This information is available on our website at stonedrawergroup.com, and we'll be sending this deck out following today's event, so you will have access to these details as well. And just a few housekeeping items. If you are experiencing audio issues, you may dial in using the toll-free number provided on the screen. That's 1-888-788-0099. Our webinar ID is 923-6206-5293, and the password is 725510. If you do need assistance, please contact a member of the Stone Drawer Group technical support team at webinar@stonedrawergroup.com, and our team members are standing by ready to assist. For those interested, we are recording today's event. We will be sending out links to all participants for access to the event recording and the presentation materials. Today's workshop format includes both a presentation and a lab demonstration. The presentation will last approximately 20 minutes. Those of you who elected the hands-on lab should have received credentials in a separate email, and all others are welcome to remain and follow along the demonstration if you choose to not participate in the hands-on lab. During the lab, we ask that all participants submit questions through Zoom's Q&A feature. You can find this on the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A, and please note that this is different from the chat feature. Our instructors will address your questions as soon as they are able. At this time, I'd like to introduce our featured instructor, Eric Archer with Stone Drawer Group. Eric is a senior consultant at Stone Drawer Group where he helps clients integrate with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, supported by Red Hat Satellite and Identity Manager. We also have on the line for technical support, Mike Savage with Red Hat and Dale Ulrich with Stone Drawer Group. They will be providing any additional support needed during today's lab environment. Again, if you do need assistance, please utilize Zoom's Q&A feature. Thanks to our talented team of instructors for facilitating this workshop. And Eric, I will pass the session over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, welcome everybody. So we are now going to turn this over to you guys to do the hands-on lab. So for you guys to jump in, use the lab guide, run through the steps, see how you can work with Satellite, integrate it with Ansible, and integrate it with our Red Hat Insights. So I will turn you guys loose. You guys have an hour and 45 minutes or so to work through this. A little bit before the end, I'll come back to just kind of wrap it up, like 5 minutes before the end. I'll do a quick wrap up and then we will call it a day. So I'm going to turn you guys loose on the lab. I'll go and look at the questions if you have anything new that has not been answered by Mike or Dale. I will turn you guys loose and I'll be back to talk. All right, so based on some feedback I'm seeing, I'm going to kind of walk through step by step slowly, some of which I can't exactly do because I've already made a system, the Red Hat satellite client, but I can walk through the majority of the steps. So let's see. I'm seeing people getting some weird errors. And could not, yeah, Ian, I'm seeing your issue. Jeff Kenny. So Jeff, can you actually post the actual error message you're getting? And then Harry, I'm going to send that to you, the lab guide in the chat. Matthew, can you, you posted the error message, but can you actually post up your prompt as well? Oh, so Matthew, you're getting that error message when you're actually in the web UI? So in the, so you're getting a load error. So you're talking about when you went ahead and added the satellite tools, you're getting that CDN loading error? And Jeff, can you post up what the actual code that you're searching for? Oh, and Matthew, did you already get your subscription manifest loaded up? So yeah, check, go to content, so the content tab, and go to subscriptions and make sure that you actually have your subscriptions. And Jeff, do you have the subscriptions as well? If you go to content and subscriptions, you should see this employee SKU. You have 5 entitlements for Jeff and Matthew. That would be the first thing. Okay, so Matthew, you're seeing it. And then you go to content and Red Hat repositories. And you should just be able to, you don't want to change anything else. You just go right up here into the search. So you just do the satellite -tools -6-7 and do a search. For Jeff and Matthew, when you logged into the satellite server, you logged in as admin with the password of Red Hat? All right, so I'm gonna leave that to my colleagues and I'm gonna kind of go back through all of the steps. Okay, to start with, you logged in to the Bastion host using SSH PuTTY or MOBA Xterm, something along those lines. All right, so we would start out by doing a git clone. Now for a lot of these, I'm going to be posting the command into the chat window, but I'm actually using a pound sign, so they're actually not going to run because I've already actually run them, but I want you guys to see the order of operations that we're working through. So to start out, we do our git clone, and that would go ahead and that would clone that repository into a directory, which is rh-infra-lab. So once the git clone process has completed, I would actually run a combination of two commands on the same command line as how I had it in the lab guide. And so this is going to change us to the rh-infra-lab directory, and then it's going to go ahead and run our playbook. So that's going to run and run and run. It's going to take a while, to be honest. And you're going to see something that looks like this. And at the end of the Ansible playbook, you're going to see a task where it's going to print your lab information. And specifically, we're concerned about the .txt file that is listed here. Now, your .txt file is going to have a slightly different name because it's actually going to start with your UUID. So it's going to be /lab01/ your 4-character UUID -lab-environment.txt. So you're going to see that, and we're actually going to want to display the contents of that file. Now to do that, we use a command called cat, which is actually short for concatenate. And we're going to cat that lab file. And that's going to give us a bunch of information. First of all, it's going to specifically identify our UUID. It's also going to identify the hosts that we have in this lab environment and their IP addresses. All right, so once that we have the information from our lab environment, then we can go in and we can put the appropriate information in the etc host file. And so we go in and we can put in the, actually, excuse me, I skipped a step. I skipped ahead a little bit because I was just looking at the command line. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go into our web UI. So we're going to go into the web browser. You're going to have to accept the security certificate. We are then going to log in to the satellite server as the username admin with the password of Red Hat. We're then going to go to the content main tab and the subscriptions sub tab. All right, so under subscriptions, when you first go in, you'll have a blue button will be available to import a subscription. The other option is you can go into Manage Manifest, and you could browse for a subscription. And then you're going to go to your home directory. You'd select the zip file, the manifest zip file, and you would click open. Now I'm going to cancel because I've already imported mine. And then it's going to take a little bit of time, and you'll get this employee SKU. You'll have 5 entitlements for it. At that point, you have subscriptions available that you can apply to any clients. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into content and Red Hat repositories. And here in the lab guide, I have provided some selections for you to put into the search box. And I'm going to try something out here because I know some of you are having problems seeing an error I've not seen before. Translate a new version. All right, what do I want? We'll just go ahead and do RHEL sticker. I'm going to select x86. And for me, it just got built. I don't know why some of you guys are having a problem with that. All right, and so Jason, there is a question about how do you get into the X term. The way that you're going to do that, if you are working on that step or you want to get into the X term, in the upper corner of your RDP session, you'll see the word activities. If you click on activities, and it may take a little while, it may take a few seconds, over to the left, it's going to open up a series of icons. Now, when you first start out, you're probably just going to see the Firefox icon, like you can see here on my screen. The other thing is actually a series of 9 dots. And this, if you hold your mouse over it, it will tell you show applications. If you click on that show applications icon, it will then list the applications that are available, and you're going to want to click on the XFCE terminal. So just click on XFCE terminal, and that will open your terminal session. So at that point, you'll see a terminal open up, and you can run your commands from there. So Jason, I hope that helped. All right, so once we have done a search for a particular repo, we will then click on the little arrow beside the particular repo that we want, and then we select the plus mark if we want to enable that repository. So once we have enabled the repositories that we want, we are then going to go back to our content main tab, and we are going to go to our sync status subtab. Yeah, Jeff, I just saw your comment about nothing to display with a button to import manifest. Yeah, you just click on the import manifest button. I also see the question, how long can we practice the lab? The labs will be open for a little bit longer than the actual session time, but not a whole lot. But if you go in and you send a request to let's do this at stonedoorgroup.com, we will actually enable you to have 5 days access to the lab. So if you want to have the lab for 5 days, you just have to shoot us a email and let us know that you were in this session and that you want the additional lab time. So Jeff mentioned, for those of you that are having this issue with the repository not showing up, there's a question or kind of an answer that by re-importing the manifest, so we re-imported it and now he can find the RPMs. Okay, so Matthew tried it a couple times. Okay, so hopefully thank you, Robert. Raymond, when you say that you're hung on the browser, what exactly are you seeing? Is it the security warning? Yeah, Lance, I just saw your message. In satellite, there's actually, at this point in time, there's kind of a mix of using Puppet and Ansible. We actually are using Ansible when we get into the Red Hat Insights. So Red Hat Insights is actually using Ansible to remediate any of the issues that you have found. So, so any issues that Red Hat finds, we're using Ansible to actually remediate those issues. Okay, so I'm not sure if everybody was experiencing that, where it looks like the RDP session went off from the Bastion host. Okay, so yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna, this is actually a bit more resource intensive than anticipated. So we're going to kill off the Bastion host, up the resources available, and then restart it. So you guys may get, or you guys will get bumped off for a little bit, and I will let you guys know when it is back up and you can connect back in. Okay, so you guys may have noticed we all got bumped. All right, so we are currently boosting the specs of the VM. So as soon as that completes, I will let you guys know and you can log back into the Bastion host. When we get these done, you will be able to just pick up where you left off. So you don't have to start from the top. So the your individual lab system instances are still up and running. Yeah, there was a question about killing the high CPU usage sessions. They're actually everybody's Firefox browsers, because you guys, we're all connected into the same Bastion host. So we're all using the exact same Bastion host to work through to run our labs and everything. So each one of us has a Firefox session open, and that's actually taking up more resources than we anticipated. We didn't actually anticipate this many people participating in the labs. We normally get a lot of people that watch and observe the demo, and then just end for the day or end for the session. But you guys are a bit harder working than a lot of our other participants. You guys all wanted to get into the lab, which is, you know, it's a good thing. We're glad you guys are doing that, but we didn't, based on our previous experience with running these workshops, we weren't expecting this high of a percentage of participants actually doing the lab. So you guys kind of surprised us. So unfortunately, you know, we can't kill off the high CPU usage sessions, or we couldn't. Obviously, we had to shut down the whole system at that point, but that's the only real option that we had. Okay, so at this point, we're just waiting for the system to come up with the additional resources. Now, as I mentioned, you guys do have the ability to get 5 days access to this lab, and I can guarantee it's not going to be as busy. You're not going to have as many people on at one time as we do right here at this session. So if you send the email, we can get you 5 days access to the lab, and then for anyone who has not been able to complete everything, you will be able to go ahead and do that. Now, while we're waiting for the Bastion host to spin back up, I want to kind of go through our demo conclusions. So we did get into all the details of Red Hat Satellite, but bullet item right here tells you Red Hat Satellite simplifies RHEL server management. And hey, if it's on a bullet point, it's got to be true, right? Um, sorry, my jokes are never really that great. Ask my kids. I joke about it, but I can't actually emphasize enough how true this statement really is. Red Hat Satellite will definitely simplify your server management. We looked at a very small piece of it. We looked at the ability to integrate a RHEL system with Red Hat Insights, and then it will explicitly identify any vulnerabilities at that host. And then you can go ahead and create a plan and use Ansible to remediate those issues. So we can fix those issues, very simply. Register with Red Hat out, let the system figure out what's wrong, and then let the system fix whatever is wrong. So that's the one part that we looked at today. There are a lot of additional components. One of the things that we did when we added the RHEL 8 client to Satellite, one of the options that we added, and I didn't go through all the different options when we were running this command just from a time perspective, but we use the --rex option. This allows us to run remote execution. So it's not regular expression, remote execution. We can run commands and we can install things and do a lot of different things from Satellite directly onto our clients. And we can do these things on one client, we can do it on a bunch of clients, we could do it on hundreds or even thousands of clients. So the way that regular, excuse me, and I just about said regular expression, the way remote execution works is you can determine and go ahead and keep things on them remotely. We can set up patching, and as I mentioned, using your lifecycle environments and your content views and what we call composite content views. These are all obviously more advanced topics we don't have time to cover, but you can set up a very granular patching process, and you can determine exactly when new patches are going to be applied to your hosts. And like I said, you could do it based on a single patch on a single host, hundreds of patches on hundreds of hosts. You have complete ability to control exactly what, when, where, why, how, or most of those at least, to set up your patching. You also have the ability to set up Ansible, so there's, we looked at the basics of Ansible, but you can get much more specific and customizable with Ansible within Satellite. We also have the ability to do provisioning, so we can provision new hosts from scratch using Ansible and Satellite. You can actually kind of do either or, and however you want to combine them or not combine them is totally up to you. They both have a lot of really cool features, but you can create new bare metal systems, you can create new VMware VMs, you can create new cloud instances on AWS or Azure. So we've got a ton of different things that we can do. So, when it says Red Hat Satellite simplifies RHEL server management, yeah, it's a bullet point, but beyond that, it is definitely very, very, very true. And unfortunately, we don't have time in this session to get into all those details. The other thing is, as we already looked at, in Red Hat Insights provides our best practice analysis for our RHEL servers, so we can see exactly what vulnerabilities or what things do we have on our different RHEL clients directly through Satellite, and then we can remediate those. And we do that. The easiest way is to do our Ansible automation plans to remediate those. So that's kind of the demo conclusion. I don't know if anyone's tried it yet, but the Bastion host is up and running again. So you can go ahead and connect back in using that. And I'm going to go ahead and do that myself. And now I mentioned I'm using this tool called Ramina, And for me, it allowed me to just go ahead and load back up. So here I'm back in. I just need to go back to activities in the upper left. And I'm going to start out, I'll go down to my ability to show applications. I'll click on that. And I'm going to launch a terminal session. And so that's spinning up. And now I'm also going to go to activities. And I am going to launch a Firefox browser. So now we have this spinning up. And there we go. We have our sync status, which is where I wanted to be. I'm going to once again go to expand all. And I'm going to select all. And now, so I went in and in previous steps, I imported my satellite or the subscription manifest into my satellite server. So that's been imported. I went into my repositories and enabled them. And now I am here in my sync status window, and I am just going to go ahead and synchronize everything. Now, some of them, obviously, they already did the synchronization. So there's really not much that's going to get pulled for the stuff that's already synced. But then we have the satellite tools for RHEL 6. So I now have my repositories available. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to make this at least look a little normal for you guys, is I'm going to, now the reason I say that is because I've already done this. So it's not like I'm creating a new one, but I'm going to kind of make this flow as much as I can like I was creating a new one. So I'm going to go to content, and I'm going to go to activation keys. And actually, yeah, I can do this. I'll just create a new one. So at this point, I do have an activation key, but I can create more. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to create activation key. And this one, I'm going to call it 78 AK. For my, I'm not going to worry about a description for the environment. I'm going to say library and content view is just my default organization view. And then I'll go ahead and save it. Okay, so that looks good. There was a question about the email address. So yeah, so Lance asked a question about the email address for the lab extension. It is let's do this at stonedoorgroup.com, and I actually posted in. Good question. Yeah, there was a question about when your client registers, it does get invalid date for the last two columns. For some reason, our clients are showing up with a newer time, and they're only off by like a second or so, but they've got a different time than the satellite server. And so because the satellite and the client don't agree, and the satellite actually looks at it and says, okay, this client actually thinks it's in the future. You know, the client saying, hey, I'm at, 10:58 and I'm the satellite and I'm seeing only 10:56. Satellite doesn't like that. So you'll see that it's not going to affect anything for our purposes. It's actually something that we have going on since we're running all these nodes in AWS. There's something going on with AWS that I have not quite resolved. But in any event, it's not going to affect anything for what we're doing here today. So yes, you should be able to get the documentation and the information about the recording at the end of the session. So when the session is over, you should get information about the lab guide, the slide deck, and the recording for the session. Oh, and I'm not sure if I answered this, Lance. I think I did, but I just want to make sure. So your question about outside the scope of this class, can CentOS and Oracle Linux be added to Satellite? Yes, technically they can, but it's not officially supported. So because CentOS and Oracle Linux are very closely related to Red Hat, people have done that in the past. They've added CentOS and Oracle Linux clients, and you'd actually set up their repositories as a new product. So actually, and I'll show you this. If you go into content and products, so you'd actually go ahead and you'd create a product, and we don't have time to go through all the details on how you do that, but that's basically what you do. So you'd make your CentOS and Oracle Linux repositories as a product, and then you would be able to apply them to the appropriate clients. Now, once again, if you have problems with those products, we won't be able to support that, from the Red Hat side, as using outside kind of party tools, or in this case repositories, but anything related to the actual satellite server itself is still going to work. All right, so going back to this, so I went through and I did my synchronization status. So kind of getting back to kind of going through the steps of the lab for anyone who's having issues. So the next thing that I need to do is I want to go ahead and create, oh wait, I did create my activation key. So I did my sync status, did my activation key. So then I'm going to go create an operating system. And so you can see I actually have different operating systems. So I would click on create operating system, but I'm actually going to look at my 8.2, which is what I already created. So I open this back up, and it's looking at it after the fact is very similar to what you'd see when you're actually creating it. All right, so I'd put in the name. I'd put in the major version and the minor version, so it's going to be RHEL underscore 8.2. Major version is 8, minor version is 2. Description is Red Hat 8.2. Family is Red Hat. I don't worry about making any changes to the password hash. And for architectures, I make sure that it is showing x86-64. Then I go to partition table, and I set this up to have the Kickstart default is my selected item. I go to my installation media, and I select Fedora Mirror. I don't worry about templates and parameters. And then I would go down here and I would select Submit. At which point you would then see you had a new operating system. The next thing that I'm going to get into is going in and configuring a host group. Now, this leads me to a distinction I want to make, and it's a little confusing. In Satellite, we have host collections. So if I go to the host main tab, I actually have the host collections subtab. But if I go to configure, if I go to the configure main tab, I can go to the host groups subtab. And that's what we created, was a host group, and I just called it 55HG. And it's a little confusing because the general breakdown of duties is that your host collections are typically used for managing groups of nodes after they have already been provisioned. So after they've been created. So if I want to do anything to an existing bunch of systems, a bunch of hosts, I would use a host collection. So host collections are primarily post-provisioning related. So after the build process has stopped or completed. Host groups, on the other hand, their main function is to provide resources when you want to build a new host. So when you want to provision a new host, you typically set up the behavior for that in your host group. So you would, for instance, looking in this host group, the thing that we would be things like what lifecycle environment it's going to be, what content view, what content source, the Puppet environment. You'd also go in and you'd set up what operating system it's going to have, what activation key it has is going to determine what subs are available to it, what subscriptions. So we set up a host group that really generally is used to define how would we provision a new host when we're using Satellite to do that provisioning. So host groups are generally pre-provisioning, so setting up and doing the build process. Host collections are typically used after a bunch of hosts have already been built. So host groups are pre-provisioning, host collections are post-provisioning. That's the general breakdown, but the bootstrap.py script, excuse me, the bootstrap.py script actually requires that you identify a host group during the run. So when you run your bootstrap.py script to register a new system as a satellite client, you actually have to tell it, okay, I want it associated with such and such a host group. So I've been working with Satellite for over 4 years now, and to this day, I still don't understand exactly why we use a host group instead of a host collection in this particular part of bootstrap.py. So it's just one of the ways that it is set up to work. So we went in, we created the host group, we already had the activation key. So we have that all set up. So then, so we have our operating system, we have our host group, all that kind of stuff. So the thing that we have to do next, go to the actual satellite server. And, or, I'm sorry, we actually go out to the RHEL 8 client and we make it a satellite server. So all right, where did my terminal go? There we go, it's hiding on me. Okay, so it's being a little slow and finicky. All right, so now right here, you can see I'm actually on the Bastion host. And so I want to actually SSH to my RHEL client. So this is the IP address of my client. And once again, it tells me that it's not registered because I actually took it out. So I now have my system. And the first thing that the system has you do at this point is adding the SSH, or excuse me, the satellite server to the information that the client knows about. So I'm just going to go ahead. Oops. Sorry, why is it doing that? All right, so this is what I actually want. So I'm on the RHEL 8 client. And the first thing that I need to do is pulling my bootstrap.py. And let me make sure I've got my correct UUID. E3, E1, let's make sure that that's correct. Yep, so that is what I would want. And so this is, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this from the satellite server. That's why I do have to put in the right UUID. Now, actually I can go ahead and run this again. It doesn't matter. What happened to my... Stop. So I don't know how it ended up with the old information. So, yep, somehow this has my old information. So yeah, this is unusual. Helps if you get the correct IP address in the correct location. Okay, let's see. All right, so now my curl command failed because it couldn't resolve the host. So now we'll go ahead and run it with the proper host information. And you can see that the file was pulled down and put into the bootstrap.py, or it was loaded onto our local host very quickly. So it's always good to have the right host names when you're trying to resolve some. All right, so I have that. Then if you remember, excuse me, the next thing that we need to do is actually change the permissions on the bootstrap.py. So this change mode, this is our permission mode tool. And we add the executable bit to this file so that this is now a file we can actually execute as something we want to run, which is what we're going to do. And so then we have the bootstrap script. Now I'm going to run this because my system is already a satellite client. So I don't need to run it again, but I will look at this. So I'm going to make sure that my syntax is correct in this paste box, which obviously you might not get this in the real world unless you're actually using a RDP session like this. So I've got my sudo, I've got my platform Python, got my bootstrap py, and by the way, syntax is a bit different in if you're registering RHEL 8 versus a RHEL 7 server. So we've made some significant changes between RHEL 7 and RHEL 8. So the command syntax to actually run this command is different depending on if you're talking a RHEL 8 or a RHEL 7 client. So logging in as admin, we have our actual server, which I have replaced the 4 question marks with my UUID. Looks good. I identify my organization name is SDG, my location name is lab, my host group identifier is 558G, my activation is 558, and then the --rex for remote execution. So I've got my command the way I want. I go ahead and I paste it and I hit enter, and obviously it's not going to do anything because it's already a client of satellite, and it would take too long to remove it and then put it back. That we'd be out of class time. So we only have about 9 minutes left anyway. One of the things that I do want to remind everybody is that we actually have the survey or the questions. So it's a feedback survey. It's a series of questions. So one of my associates is going to be posting that up again. So if you guys could please go ahead and fill that out. Let us know what your thoughts were on this particular workshop. So, so yeah, those questions are probably going to pop up again. If you could just answer them. Obviously, if you already put in comments or whatever, just you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it a second time. I know that would be annoying, but you should be able to just pop through all the questions and submit it. All right, so we have this Bootstrap PY script that we run through. If you remember, one of the things I pointed out originally is that you'll get to a certain point where it's going to say wait for cert 10. When you get to that point, you want to go back into your satellite web UI. Move this over a little bit so we can actually see the whole thing again. So we go into infrastructure and capsules. And we have a capsule with the name of the server. And I didn't talk about this too much earlier, but let me cover it since we do have a little bit of time right now. Capsules are a tool that you can install as a standalone component in a satellite environment. And the capsules are what really actually interact with your client. So when you want to do things in a satellite environment, the satellite component itself is kind of like the brains. It figures out, okay, what are we doing? How are we doing it? And that kind of stuff. And then it hands the work off to the capsule. Now, every satellite server that you build is going to have an integrated capsule. So it's going to have a capsule internal. And then you can configure a bunch of other capsules that are out there, somewhere in your environment that are actually doing the work. And they may be in the same local data center with your satellite server, or they could be in some remote data center. And that's, one of the things that we do with capsules all the time is to create them in remote data centers. And then if you want to work with the servers or, the hosts that you have in that remote data center and manage them with satellite, well, you can do that. So you still have your satellite server doing the management in your primary data center. You're gonna have capsules all over the world. And I do mean that literally. You could have them all over the world, no matter where your satellite server is located. And so then you can manage your hosts anywhere in the world using a central satellite infrastructure. So just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Now with this, we're in the process of trying to add a new client as a satellite client. So we get to the point where it says the wait for cert 10. We come in here, we go to infrastructure and capsules. And then in the capsules view, we click on Puppet CA. And then we have this certificate section over here to the left. And if you have a certificate request that's pending, you'll actually see it over here next to this little yellow triangle. it's kind of like a warning sign. So you click on that or the one next to it, and it would show you any pending certificates. And then under the actions column, you'll be able to sign that certificate. Now, for our purposes, we've already signed for this client, so it doesn't show up as pending. It's been moved to the current certificate. So we select that, at which point your bootstrap.py will continue. When that finishes, you want to go ahead and register this as a Insights client. All right, come on. Oh, there we go. Oh, I missed a letter. Not that it really matters because we're not actually going to be running this. But that is what you would run to register this with Insights. And then once we have this registered with Insights, we would exit out of the client. So we go in here, we exit. We would then SSH into the satellite server and update its IP addresses. In the etc host file. So we go in, we set that up, and you guys saw I did that, and I did it incorrectly to begin with. So I had to go back in and fix it. So now I have the correct IP addresses for my RHEL 8 client and the IP address for the actual satellite server itself. So go in, set that up. And we do that so that when we go ahead and start trying to do our remediation with Red Hat Insights from the satellite server, it will actually work correctly. It's funny how it's actually it has to go out to the right host in order to fix that host. So let's see. So we have this. And I thought we had already resolved this. I don't know, something happened when we had to reboot. Oh yeah, okay, so everything is resolved, so we're good. And so that is basically it. And that takes us right up to the end of our time. So if you guys have any last minute questions, go ahead and add those up. So we'll try to answer them. There was a question, if you try to run Bootstrap twice, if you do it the same way, it's actually just going to fail and give you an error message basically saying, oh, you've already done this. If you really want to, there is a -- force option, and that would recreate the same host as a satellite client. So you do have the ability if you do the -force option. Okay, there was a comment. Yeah, so as I said, the invalid date for the last two columns, that's just an issue we're seeing with AWS at this point. And then, yeah, when you go ahead and sign the certificate, you sometimes get an error message saying unable to sign a non-pending. Well, actually, if it says unable to sign a non-pending, a lot of times it's like if you click too fast, or the main thing is a lot of times people will click it and it doesn't happen immediately, so they click it again and it comes back, and the first click actually does take. It just takes longer than people would expect or would want. And I mean, it's just literally just a few seconds or parts of a second. But people, because they clicked it a second time, it comes back, and that second click is basically saying, hey, I already signed this, so I can't sign it again. So that's why it says when you get the unable to sign a non-pending certificate, it means you click the sign button too many times too fast. And then I'm seeing a message about running the playbook from satellite failed to connect to the host via SSH. I have not seen that one before. Let me take a look at my plans. So you did a run playbook. Yeah, if you get that eternity, the message that I'm seeing, I really check your Etsy host file and make sure that you've got the right IP address and the right host name, that it's exactly right. That's the most common reason why you would see something like that. All right, well, with that, we have reached and actually exceeded the end of our time. So we are going to call this. Hopefully you guys all learned a lot and had a great time. Like I said, please, if you want to extend the lab and have more time with it, just shoot us an email at letsdothis@stonedoorgroup.com. So thanks everybody, have a great week.